Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. Today's story doesn't begin with love at first sight or a meet cute in some bookstore. It starts with a broken cabinet door and a screwdriver I couldn't find. Strange, right? But trust me, that cabinet told me more about my marriage than a decade of whispered promises ever did. It was Sunday. Quiet. One of those mornings when the light filters in just right and you think maybe things are okay. I was in the kitchen, crouched down, trying to fix the same broken hinge for the third time that month. The screws wouldn't bite, like they were too tired to hold anything up anymore. Kind of like me. Behind me, Celeste was on the phone, whispering. Again. She always took calls in the hallway now, standing by the coat rack like it was a confessional booth. I used to ask who it was. Not anymore. You can only ask the same question so many times before you realize you're not avoiding the answer. The answer's avoiding you. I gave up on the cabinet, grabbed my coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table. The toast had gone cold. So had she, honestly. For months. She walked back in like nothing happened, like the silence didn't weigh 1,000 pounds. She kissed my cheek. I flinched. She didn't notice. "Do you need anything from the store?" she asked, casual as always. I looked at her. Really looked. She was already dressed, hair done, lipstick on, perfume that didn't smell like hers. And that tote bag slung over her shoulder? Not the one she used for groceries. It was the one she took to her weekend retreats. She didn't wait for my answer. Just grabbed her keys and called over her shoulder, "I'll be back in a bit." Except she wouldn't be. Because this time I followed her. Not in some dramatic, private investigator way. I just got in my car and drove a few minutes behind. No plan. Just gut instinct and 1,000 sleepless nights telling me I wasn't crazy. She didn't go to the store. She didn't even pretend to. She pulled into a driveway I'd never seen before. Got out. Smiled wider than I'd seen in months. And walked into a house like she belonged there. No knock. No hesitation. I parked half a block down. My hands were shaking. Not from rage, from clarity. From finally seeing what I'd been too afraid to name. 10 minutes later, she came out with him. Tall. Button-down shirt. Hand on her lower back like he'd been there for years. They kissed. And I didn't look away. Because the truth is, I wasn't heartbroken. I was free. She thought I'd be devastated. She thought I'd fall apart. But all I felt was relief. When she came home later that night, lying through her perfect teeth about long lines at checkout, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You don't have to lie anymore." And what she said back, that was the real betrayal. That night, she came home humming. Actually humming. Like the woman who'd just kissed another man in broad daylight didn't have a care in the world. She dropped her bag on the counter, kicked off her shoes, and gave me a little sideways glance like she was waiting for me to complain about something. But I didn't. I just stood there, sipping the tea I'd let go cold, watching her like I was seeing her for the first time without filters. And that's when I said it. "You don't have to lie anymore." She froze. Like I'd reached into her ribcage and grabbed whatever was left of her illusion. For a full 5 seconds, she didn't say anything. Then, with a shaky little chuckle, she asked, "What are you talking about?" I repeated it, calmly this time. "You don't have to lie anymore, Celeste. I saw you. I followed you. I know." Her face lost its color, and suddenly, the weight of the tote bag over her shoulder seemed to grow heavier. She tried to bluff. Saw me where? The house. The man. The kiss. All of it. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't breaking anything. I wasn't doing what she expected. And that made her panic more than anything. "Oh, come on," she snapped, her voice rising. "So now you're spying on me?" "I didn't plan to. But you weren't even trying to hide it. You walked into his house like you'd been doing it for weeks." I set the cup down on the counter. It clinked louder than I meant it to. "You could have just told me you wanted out." "I didn't want out," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Then what was that?" I asked. She paused. "It's not what you think." That sentence. That ridiculous, lazy, overused sentence that cheaters cling to when caught red-handed. It boiled something inside me I didn't know was still alive. I shook my head. "You know what's wild, Celeste? It's not even the kiss. Or the lies. It's that you came back here like nothing happened. Like I'm some background character in your real life." She flinched. Not because I was loud, but because I was right. For months, she'd been emotionally checked out, and I'd been clinging to the shell of our marriage, hoping she'd come back to me. But she was already gone, just wearing my last name out of habit. She walked over to the table and sat down, suddenly quiet. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. That was the first honest thing she'd said in weeks. I didn't sit. I couldn't. If I sat, I'd stay. And I wasn't going to stay in a story where I was just a placeholder until something more exciting came along. You're free now, I said, walking to the hallway closet and pulling out the duffel bag I'd quietly packed hours earlier. And so am I. Her eyes widened. Wait, what are you doing? I'm not playing the part you wrote for me, Celeste. I'm not going to beg. I'm not going to compete. I'm not going to be the safe option while you chase whatever midlife thrill this is. She stood up quickly, stepping toward me. You can't just leave. We built a life together. I looked at her, and for the first time in months, I felt clear. You walked out of this life a long time ago. I'm just finally catching up. Then I walked to the door, opened it, and before stepping through, I added one last thing, not out of pettiness, but closure. Tell him he can have the cabinet too. It's broken, just like everything else. And I left. I didn't go to a friend's house. I didn't check into a hotel. I drove 3 towns over to a tiny motel I used to pass on business trips, the kind with buzzing neon lights and the smell of old carpet. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions. I gave her a fake name, paid in cash, and took a room near the back, away from the road. I didn't bring much with me, just enough to last a few days. I had no idea what came next. All I knew was that I couldn't be near her. The first night alone was strange. No arguing, no pretending, no walking on eggshells. Just the low hum of the refrigerator in the corner and my own thoughts screaming through the quiet. I stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m., wondering if I was making the right choice, and hating myself for still caring what she thought. But by morning, something shifted. Not peace exactly, but a weird kind of stillness. I wasn't okay, but I wasn't trapped either. She didn't call. Not that day, not the next. But on the third morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and a string of voicemails. The first few were calm, rehearsed. Milo, can we just talk? I think we both said things we didn't mean. But the ones after that, they cracked. Milo, I swear it didn't mean anything. Please just answer. You're being dramatic. This isn't you. And finally, where are you? What am I supposed to tell people? That last one stuck with me. Not I miss you. Not I'm sorry. Just concern over her image. The performance mattered more to her than the truth. I didn't respond. By that evening, she'd messaged my sister, my boss, even my dentist. She started pulling strings, digging, fishing for someone who'd tell her where I went. But I'd left no trail. I needed to know what she was without me, not just who she was with. And the answer came faster than I expected. Late that night, someone knocked on my motel door. I froze. My stomach dropped. No one knew I was there. No one except. It wasn't her. It was him. The man from the house. From the kiss. From her lie. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten me. He just stood there in the dim hallway light and said, "She told me you left her. That you gave up." I stared at him, barely breathing. She left first. He looked genuinely confused. She said you walked out. Said you weren't stable. That she tried to help you. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how quickly she rewrote the story. In her version, she was the hero. The patient wife. The one who held it together while I unraveled. I wanted to slam the door in his face. But then he said something I'll never forget. I think she's done this before. You're not the first. Something hollow cracked inside my chest. I stepped out into the hallway. Why are you telling me this? He shrugged. Because I thought I was different. Until I wasn't. Then he handed me something. A flash drive. She didn't know I had this. And just like that, he turned and walked away. I stared at the tiny device in my hand, my heart pounding. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was something much, much deeper. And I was finally ready to see it. I sat on the edge of the motel bed for nearly an hour, just holding that flash drive. My palms were sweaty. I must have flipped it over 100 times, as if staring at it long enough would prepare me for whatever was on it. My chest was tight, and even though the air conditioning was humming, I couldn't stop shaking. Part of me wanted to throw it out the window and pretend I never saw that man. But I couldn't. I needed answers, even if they ruined me. I pulled out my laptop, the same one I used to build anniversary slideshows for Celeste. The same one she used to borrow for work stuff. I plugged in the drive and waited. It loaded slowly, like it somehow knew the weight of what it was about to reveal. There were only 3 files. No labels, no folders. Just raw, time-stamped video clips. I clicked on the first one. It started in our living room. Our couch. Our throw pillows. Her laugh. But not with me. It was her and that man, Seth, sitting close. Closer than I'd ever seen them in public. She was barefoot, hair up, wine in hand, and wearing the oversized sweatshirt I bought her for Christmas. The one she claimed was too sentimental to ever wear outside the house. They kissed, slowly, like they'd done it before. Her hands were in his hair. His were under the sweatshirt. I paused the video, not because I couldn't watch, but because something in the background caught my eye. The wall clock. It was 4:23 p.m. That was the exact time I was stuck in traffic after picking up her dry cleaning. The same day she told me she was working late on a team project. I remembered it so clearly because she hadn't even texted me a thank you. My stomach turned, but I clicked the second video. Different day, same story, same house, different man. Not Seth. This time it was someone older, taller, a colleague from her firm. The one she said reminded her of her dad, and who always gave her career advice. The laughter was forced this time. She kept checking her phone. My contact name must have been lighting up on her screen. I remembered calling her that night 3 times, worried because she hadn't come home by midnight. She eventually answered and told me to stop being needy. I had blamed myself for that night, for being too emotional, too clingy. Now I saw her, right there on screen, whispering into another man's ear while she let my calls go to voicemail. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to punch something, scream, cry, but none of that happened. Instead, I just sat there, hollow, like every truth I thought I knew had been vacuumed out of my chest. The third file wasn't a video. It was audio, just her voice, recorded secretly, probably on Seth's phone. She was talking to someone, another woman, maybe a friend. She said, "Milo would never leave me. He's too soft. I could burn the house down, and he'd probably apologize for not handing me the matches faster." The laugh that followed, I didn't recognize it. It wasn't just betrayal. It was mockery, contempt. I closed the laptop, stood up, and paced the room, gripping the sides of my head. I wasn't just a husband cheated on. I was a joke. A walking comfort zone for someone who saw my kindness as weakness, my loyalty as stupidity. But not anymore. I wasn't going to beg for closure. I wasn't going to ask her why. I was going to do something that would make her regret ever thinking I was the one who'd break. And it started with a message I sent to myself from the motel that night. Subject line, "Her story ends at dawn." The sunrise over that cheap motel parking lot hit differently that morning. Not peaceful, not warm, just raw, like a light being forced into a room that hadn't seen truth in years. I hadn't slept. I couldn't. The things I saw on that flash drive kept playing in my head on a loop. Not just the betrayals, but the way she laughed about them. The way she laughed about me. But I didn't break. Instead, I opened a blank document on my laptop and started writing. Not a revenge plan, not a letter to her, but a record, a timeline. Every little moment I had second-guessed over the last year. All the canceled dinners, the fake meetings, the arguments that made no sense. The dots I never connected. I wasn't building a case for court. I was building one for myself. I needed to see it. All of it. Without her manipulation distorting the facts. By noon, I had 11 pages of notes. And that's when I realized something terrifying and oddly empowering. She didn't just cheat on me. She used me. I had been funding her little self-discovery journey, paying bills while she played house with men who never stayed long enough to see the laundry pile up. I was her safety net, her invisible backup plan, the man she could return to after every bad decision. Not anymore. I drove back into town later that day. Not home. Not to her office. She wasn't there. Not yet. But her team was. I asked to speak to her assistant, a girl named Harper who had always been oddly kind to me during holiday parties. I handed her a small envelope with a thumb drive and one sticky note that read, "If you're still loyal to her, destroy this. If you're loyal to truth, watch it." I walked away before she could respond. Why did I do it? Because I wanted at least one person close to Celeste to see who she really was, and not the curated version she wore like a tailored suit. That same evening, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It read, "You don't know me, but I watched the videos. I'm her assistant. I'm so sorry. She's done this before. You deserve better." I had no idea. Then she sent another message. "She's on her way to your sister's house. She's panicking." And that's when I realized Celeste had finally noticed I was gone for real. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. I wasn't sitting at home, waiting with sad eyes and open arms. I was gone, and she didn't know how to handle it. I turned off my phone and checked into a different motel. One even smaller, off the highway, where no one would think to look. I paid cash again. No ID. No record. The next day, my sister messaged me from her husband's phone. She showed up. Tried crying. Said you were unstable. I told her to leave. She looked scared, like she couldn't recognize the version of you that's done playing the fool. I sat on the motel bed and finally let myself breathe. Not from relief. From control. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to her anymore. I was making choices that had nothing to do with her approval, her moods, or her stories. That night, I wrote one final message and scheduled it to send 2 days later. It was to Celeste. No insults. No begging. No accusations. Just one sentence. You thought I'd chase you. You forgot what happens when the one you depend on stops needing you. The message I scheduled to send, that single, loaded sentence, went out exactly 48 hours later. I timed it to hit her phone just as her workday would start, around 9:04 a.m., when she'd be settling into her desk, trying to pretend her life wasn't quietly imploding. I imagined her fingers trembling as she read it, her mind racing to regain control over a situation she no longer had the script for. But I didn't wait around to see her reaction. I was done watching her. Instead, I met with a lawyer. A quiet, sharp man named Victor Delgado who didn't flinch when I handed him my printout of notes and timelines. He flipped through the 11 pages slowly, his brow furrowing deeper with each paragraph. After 15 minutes of silence, he looked up and said, "You've been her safety net for too long. Let's cut the ropes." I had already removed my name from the joint account the day before. What I hadn't told her, and what she'd likely never bothered to check, was that most of our finances were still tied to my business account, not hers. I'd kept it separate on instinct, never knowing how smart that would turn out to be. She had never contributed to it, but had enjoyed its comfort. The house, in my name. The car she drove, leased under my company. The only thing she truly owned was the guilt she buried under lies. Victor told me to move quietly, not to warn her, not to threaten, just act. So I did. Over the next 24 hours, I closed our streaming accounts, transferred the utilities into my name only, and scheduled the locks on the house to be changed the next week. Not out of spite, but because I didn't feel safe knowing she could walk in at any time with the same casual cruelty she'd used for months. I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting myself. On the third day, she finally found me. She showed up at the motel. I don't know how. Maybe Harper told her. Maybe my sister caved. Maybe she followed a paper trail I missed. But there she was, standing outside room 19 in a crisp white blouse, oversized sunglasses, and the same perfume she wore on our first anniversary. I opened the door and didn't say a word. She did. Milo. Not babe. Not bug. My actual name. Spoken like she hadn't said it in years. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice trembling. "Please." I let her in, not because I owed her, but because I needed to see, face to face, how far gone we really were. She sat on the edge of the chair, not the bed. She looked smaller, not physically, just deflated. Her energy, her control, her charm, all absent. "I messed up," she began. "But you're not blameless either." There it was, the backhanded apology. I almost laughed, but I didn't interrupt. I felt unseen, like I was fading in our marriage. "You stopped noticing me." I finally spoke. "You're right. I stopped noticing you, but only after you started disappearing on purpose." She blinked. Hard. "I'm not here to fight," I said, "and I'm definitely not here to fix anything. I'm just here to hear whatever you need to say before we stop being anything at all." Her lips parted, then closed again. She wasn't ready for me to be calm. She needed me angry, needed me broken so she could feel justified. "I just thought," she whispered, "you'd fight for me." I nodded. "That's the problem. You thought you could break me, and I'd still beg for the pieces." She started to cry. Big, silent tears. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to comfort her. I handed her a folder, divorce papers, already drafted. Her name highlighted. Her responsibilities outlined. Nothing cruel, just final. She looked at it like it was written in another language. "I loved you," she said, almost like a question. I nodded again. "And you loved being loved." Then I opened the door. She didn't leave right away, but eventually, she did. And this time, I didn't watch her go. 3 days passed after she left that motel room, and not a single word came from her. No calls. No texts. No emails begging for another chance or asking if we could talk. And that silence? It was louder than any of her lies. I didn't need to hear her voice anymore to know exactly what she was thinking. She was trying to calculate, strategize, craft a version of the story where I was the one who gave up. She was the victim, and the truth was some blurry gray area that no one could prove. But she didn't know I had already written the final chapter. And unlike her, I didn't need to embellish it with drama. While she stayed quiet, I moved. Victor filed the divorce papers officially. I met with a financial advisor to secure every asset that legally belonged to me. I removed her from all insurance policies, accounts, shared memberships. I closed the box of our life like a file that no longer needed updating. And then I did the last thing I'd been dreading. I returned home. The house was exactly as I left it. Empty. Not in the way you think. The furniture was all there. The lights still worked. The air fresheners still puffed out lavender every 20 minutes like nothing had changed. But it felt empty, like she'd vacuumed the soul out of it before walking out the door. I walked into the bedroom, half expecting to see one of her dresses hanging on the door or a half-finished glass of wine on the nightstand. But there was only a note, folded perfectly, sitting in the center of the bed. My name was scrawled on the front in her delicate handwriting. Milo. That was it. I stood there for a long time, staring at the note. I didn't want to read it. I didn't need to. But I opened it anyway. Inside, there were 4 lines. You were better than me. You always were. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I finally saw it. See, I didn't cry. I didn't clutch the paper to my chest. I folded it back, placed it in the nightstand drawer, and closed it. That chapter didn't need rereading. But here's the part she didn't count on. I wasn't just leaving her. I was leaving the entire version of myself I had been for years. The man who shrank himself to avoid conflict. The man who mistook crumbs for loyalty. The man who thought staying meant strength. She thought this was going to be her redemption arc. That I'd forgive her eventually. That I'd grow bitter, miss her touch, maybe even find her one night after too many drinks and say, let's try again. But the truth? I didn't miss her. I missed me. The man I used to be before I let her shape me into someone easier to abandon. So I sold the house. Quietly. Fast. To a young couple who walked through the front door holding hands and smiling like they still believed in forever. I didn't tell her. I didn't need to. When she finally reached out a week later, she didn't ask how I was. She asked something painfully predictable. Why didn't you tell me you sold the house? I waited a few hours before responding. Then I wrote, you walked out thinking I'd beg you to come back. I walked out and never looked behind me. That house belonged to the man who waited for you. I'm not him anymore. And then I blocked her. Not out of spite, but peace. The kind of peace that only comes when you finally stop hoping the person who hurt you will be the one to heal you. I left the city 2 weeks after the sale closed. No grand goodbye, no dramatic social media post, no announcement. I just packed what I needed into the back of my car. Some books, a few clothes, my laptop, and a dusty old photograph of me before I met her. Before I became the man who bent himself into someone else's shadow. I moved to a small coastal town I once visited on a road trip years ago. It wasn't glamorous. No big downtown or fancy coffee shops. Just quiet streets, ocean air, and the kind of silence that doesn't scream at you. I rented a small place above a bookstore where the landlord gives me discounts for helping shelve new titles on weekends. I work remotely now, build puzzles, and write in the mornings. And for the first time in years, I don't wake up with dread in my chest. Strangely, I don't think about her much anymore. Not in the way I used to. When her face does come to mind, it's like remembering a character from a story I outgrew. Not with hate, not even pain, just distance. And that, I think, is the real ending. You know what no one tells you? Closure doesn't come when someone apologizes or explains themselves. It comes when you decide the story is finished and that you deserve a new one. A few months ago, I met someone. Her name's Lainey. She teaches music at a community center and always forgets where she parked her car. She's not perfect. I'm not either. But we laugh. A lot. She asks questions and actually waits for the answers. When I told her about my past, the betrayal, the lies, the motel rooms, she didn't flinch or pity me. She just said, I'm glad you found your way out. So am I. I guess I'm writing this not for her, and not even for me, but for someone out there who's still holding the door open, hoping they'll turn around. Let me say it clearly. If someone wanted to stay, they would have. You don't have to chase someone who walked away from you with dry eyes. You don't have to shrink just to fit into someone else's version of love. And you are allowed to walk away quietly and still win. Because peace doesn't make noise, but you'll know it when you find it. If you've ever lived through a betrayal and came out stronger, or if a single event changed the course of your life, we want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. Let's remind each other that even the worst chapters can lead to beautiful endings. Thanks for watching, and remember, you're not alone. You're on Reddit Confessions.